Understanding and managing data is essential for building any application. In earlier modules, such as Module 2 and 3, we briefly discussed the fundamentals of state management and variables in app development. However, we will go deeper to learn more in this module. What this module covers is, first, you will learn different representation of the data and variables, and we're going to go deep into scope and mutability. Then you will learn about state and what is state management in FlutterFlow. We specifically learn more about app, page, and component state in FlutterFlow. And finally, we will review generated code to see where in our code state management techniques appears and how you can track them in the source code. All right. I cannot wait to get it started, and everything is getting very exciting from now on. Before we start learning state management, we need to learn about data because a state is a type of data that needs to be stored, manipulated, and shown. And that's why data representation is a fundamental concept in app development. It refers to the method and structures used to store and manipulate data. How data is structured can greatly influence how efficiently an app performs tasks. Data is often represented using variables. You already learned about variables in Module 2 and 3, but let's review again. Variables in FlutterFlow let you store and manage dynamic data, essential for creating interactive and responsive applications. Using variables, you can capture user input, track states, and manipulate data across different parts of your app. When you are dealing with variables, you often deal with scope. But what are scopes? The scope of a variable is determined by where it's created. For instance, if it's created at the app level, it can be accessed anywhere. However, a variable created at the page level can only be accessed on that page. There are different types of variables available in FlutterFlow. Local variables that are confined to a specific widget or page used for handling data within a localized context. Global variables that can be accessed and modified throughout the entire app, allowing for consistent data management across pages. FlutterFlow provides some variables to all apps called global properties. Global properties are pre-built variables in FlutterFlow that you can use across all pages. These properties are predefined by FlutterFlow, meaning you cannot create or modify them yourself. They are designed to help you perform common tasks efficiently, no matter what type of app you are developing. One pro tip is always to check FlutterFlow documentation to learn more about global properties. When creating variables in FlutterFlow, there are few important considerations regarding their names, data types, and nullability and initial values. Start by giving your variable a meaningful and descriptive name that reflects its purpose. This name can be used throughout your app to reference the variable, so it is important to keep it clear and consistent with your naming conventions. One convention that I recommend is lower camel case naming for variables. Next, you need to select an appropriate data type for your variable. But what is a data type? Data types define the kind of data variable can store and manipulate within your app. Managing data types correctly ensures that your app functions as intended, particularly when handling user inputs, storing data, and interacting with databases. FlutterFlow supports various data types to accommodate different needs in your app, such as primitive data type, composite data type, built-in, and enums. First, let's start with primitive data types. Primitive data types are the most basic data types. They include integers, doubles, boolean, and strings. There is also one special type that I would like to talk about, null. A null value represents the absence of a value or a null value. In FlutterFlow, allowing a variable to be null can be beneficial in scenarios such as user input, before a user enters data, a variable can start as null and only hold a value once the user provides input. Conditional logic in cases where certain data might not always be applicable. A null value allows you to handle the scenarios of data more flexibly. For example, an optional user settings. Local states. When fetching data from an API, variables can be null until the data is loaded, allowing you to differentiate between loading and loaded states easily. That's why when you create variables in FlutterFlow, you will see the nullable option. This option determines if a variable can hold a null value, meaning that it can exist without any data. If the nullable option is enabled, the variable can start as null and only receive a value when needed. If disabled, the variable must always have a value, which means you'll need to provide an initial value when it's needed. And that's why initial value in this case becomes important. Now, let's talk about more complex types. Composite data types are made of primitive data types. They can hold multiple values and can be used to structure and organize data in more meaningful. Next is FlutterFlow's built-in data types, which they ensure consistency and facilitate easy retrieval from simple color values and media URLs to complex geographical data. Here are a few examples supported in FlutterFlow, but don't worry, you don't need to memorize them or understand them all at once. You can always refer to FlutterFlow documentation if needed. We will use many of these types together throughout this course as well. But what if you need a data type that is not among these types? You need a custom data type. But what is a custom data type? A custom data type can be especially useful when you need a specific structure for your data that doesn't fit into the predefined types, and this is very often happening in building applications. Think of this example. You might create a custom data type for a review in your e-commerce app, which includes several pieces of data like a username, ratings, and comments, and an ID. With custom data types, you can even make more complex structure. Imagine that the review data type that you created can be part of another custom data type. For example, when you receive data from your backend, you will have a list of reviews as one of the fields of the data that you receive. Beautiful, right? Imagine where the possibilities can go. So essentially, custom data types have several key advantages. Reusable. Define it once, use it everywhere. So easy to update, change one structure in one place and see it all reflected throughout your app. Consistency, keeps data format uniform across the application. And efficiency, simplifies complex data handling, reducing errors and redundant code. One of the useful way of using custom data type is when you have a JSON structure. In Module 2 and 3, we talked about JSON structure and what it is. It is one of the most common ways to receive data from an API and use it in your application. We're going to work with JSON throughout this course quite a lot. Stay tuned for the upcoming modules. You can convert JSON to a custom data type to ensure type-safe use in your application. This conversion process to or from JSON is typically called serialized and deserialized data. The good news is that FlutterFlow will handle converting to and from JSON automatically if you use a custom data type. It might be interesting to see how this is going to look like in a generated code. Although we will see that in the upcoming video in this module, let me just give you a sneak peek. When you create a custom data type, it internally creates a struct that is a class name which is generated by appending a struct keyword to the name of the data type. A struct or a structure is a composite data type that lets you combine fields of different data types to construct a data structure to suit your specific needs. There is one more data type that we should talk about it, and that is enum. Enums or enumerate types are a special kind of data type consist of a predefined set of related values, each distinct value. This means that when you use an enum, you ensure a variable can only be assigned one of these values. For instance, you may have an enum for product type, size, or categories. A clothing store app might use enums to categorize clothing sizes, small, medium, large. Or for tracking the status of orders like processes and tasks, for example, pending, in process, completed, or cancelled. Enums are also can prevent invalid values from being assigned. For example, if you have an enum for days of the week, you cannot mistakenly assign a non-existent day. In contrast, with strings or numbers, you might accidentally use an invalid or misspelled value like, as you see on the screen, Sunday, Sunday. All right, now let's talk about another important concept, mutability. There are two types of variables, mutable and immutable. But what really it means, let me give you an example in the context of widgets. Think of parameters. They are immutable, meaning they cannot be changed once passed into the widget. We have seen it when we created components. However, state variables are mutable and can be updated and modified as the widget's state changes. We will learn about them in the following videos. Stay tuned. Another example of immutable variables is constants. Constants do not change once you set its value. You cannot change it from within the app. Constants are used to define values that you believe are fixed, like a fixed shipping cost or an API endpoint. They're going to always stay the same throughout your lifetime of your application. So after all, how can you set a variable? Let me reveal the set from variable or set variable menu in FlutterFlow. This is a powerful feature that allows you to dynamically control the content or behavior of your widgets using data stored in variables. When you select a variable from this menu, you instruct FlutterFlow to use its value to populate and modify the widget's properties such as text, visibility, or styling. This menu provides various variable sources, including data specific to the page or component, global properties that applies across the entire app, constants, and more. By choosing the appropriate variables, you can make sure your app is more interactive and responsive to user input, data changes, or other conditions. But don't worry about that. That's the purpose of this module. You're going to learn all about this in the upcoming videos as well as upcoming modules. Fantastic. It's time to start working with variables in action. Let's get to the next video. All right, it's time to see a demo. All right, here is my app builder and the app that we've been building together. So we're going to see how we can create data types. So on the navigation menu on the left, you can click on the data type menu, and then you will have access to both data types and enums. So for example, you can also create a data type by just uploading your JSON example in this case. And FlutterFlow will understand and create a data type, a custom data type for you. And also enum, you can create different enums. Let's see what we can do. Let me go back to our profile setting page and let's go to address list. What we can do right now, I'm going to create a data type for my address. So just instead of coming like the text as you see, so imagine we are receiving these addresses and we want to actually have a type for them. So, and then for each of these addresses, we're going to have a type, whether it's going to be home, office, or maybe others. This type is going to be a very nice example of creating enums. Just going to go back to the custom data types and I'm going to create an enums called address type. Once you created your enum, you can now add value. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to add a value of office, home, and others. All right, this is going to be helpful. Now, I'm going to create a custom data type right now. So I'm going to go back to custom data type and create by clicking on create a new data type or click on the plus. Let's say I want to create an address data type. After creating your data type, you need to add your fields. So let me quickly add a field. Let's say we're going to have a field of postal address, which the type is going to be string. In this case, it's not going to be a list. I'm just going to let it disable. And then we're going to have a phone number. So here you can select either an integer or still I can go for a string. For now, actually, I'm going to select an integer. And then you have a type, like the address type. So, and now you can combine it with the enum that you created. So I'm going to scroll down to the enum, and then I'll select the enums that I just created. Fantastic. And I can also go ahead and give it a default value to each of these fields if it's necessary. For example, I want to by default select others. That means when we are receiving a data from API and the type is not available or there is no value, it's null, then the default is going to be used. You can continue adding more fields as you need. For example, you may need to have geolocation. There is a built-in data for that, longitude and latitude. All right, creating that. And imagine now even your office is going to have an image. So you can actually go ahead and choose an image in this case. Or in this case, we're also going to have a Boolean where the default address is going to be selected, is selected. This is now representing my address. We also talked about constant. How can you create that? If you go to the app values, under the app values, you have another option called constants. And what can be a constant for my application in this case? For example, API URLs or the values that you are going to use throughout our application. But what could be a good example for this application that we are building right now? If I go back to my profile settings, and if I open the widget tree, this column is going to have a padding. And if we go back to other pages, let's, for example, open the address list, you'll see that we also have some kind of padding here between the edge and the content. Also, if I go to the product list page, the same is happening for this page as well. So the column is going to have some kind of padding. So at the moment, they are different and you need to manually set them. But how can you make sure you can make them consistent? And by changing one, you change it everywhere. That's a perfect scenario for constant. Let me go back to the constant, app constant, and then create two different values. Padding from left. And the type is going to be integer. There are multiple types here. And I will give it a value, for example, 30. And padding from right. And also give it 30. All right, now we have two constants variables. Now I go back to my pages. And this time, if I go to the padding, instead of the manual number that I'm adding here, I can click on set variable icon. There you go. Here's the icon. You'll see it everywhere. You see it here, there, and in opacity, and almost everywhere. Now I can click on set variable, and I have multiple options here. We're going to work with this throughout this course. These are the variables that you can set, but one of those is going to be the constants, the ones that you just defined. All right, you're going to have a padding from left. I'm just going to select, and I'll go to the right, and I'll do the same. Fantastic. So now I go back to my profile setting page. I select a column. I apply the same constant from left and constant from right. So this size is now unified between this page and the other page, which means if I now go back to my constant and if I change this to 40, if I go back to P pages, see a little bit more space in both pages. Lovely. There's one more thing I want to show you. So imagine you're going to change this text right now. This text, when I select it, as you can see, it's statically written here. So that means, well, it doesn't change automatically, right? I can click on Set Variable menu, and I have multiple options here. Well, throughout the course, when we have different APIs, you will see that we're actually going to use the custom data type and the different APIs to get the value here. But for now, I wanted to demonstrate the global properties. So as you can see, let's imagine you're going to have the current time and current location for this user. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to actually drag and drop another text. And we're going to have here the timer. Let's say that the current time, I'm going to set on the text, go to global property, and then I'll check the current time. You always have different options to make it nicer. For example, you can format your date if you would like to do that. And you have these options by saying, how do you want to do that? Like if I want to just go this format, I can select it, then confirm. All right, now when you run the application, you're going to see the current time automatically appearing here. And another use case of global properties, let's say it's a conditional one. Let's say you want to show this current time conditionally based on the width of the screen. We also have done that in the responsive video in the previous modules. For example, you can go to global properties and you will see that you have the screen size, which is nice. And here you can say if the screen size is greater than, for example, 600, then in this case, show this. Otherwise, don't show it. This is the way that you can also set variables for conditional. Let me just remove and disable this for now. All right, that was a quick demo of how you can create constant and different custom types in case you need, and also an overview of built-in types and how you can set variables in different places. So let's go to the next video and work with state and state management. We're going to come back to the demos and work more with variables, different variables, as well as states. State management involves monitoring the changes within your app and updating the user interface to reflect these changes. The user interface displays information based on state variables. When these state variables change, the UI updates to reflect the changes. All right, you may ask, what are state variables? State variables are themselves variables, meaning they have a name and a data type. They also have an initial value set when you create the variables. Once you create a state variable, its value can be used to update the user interface. We will get to this shortly, bear with me. In FlutterFlow, there are a few types of state variables that you can create: app state, page state, and component state. Let's just start with app state. App state is shared across multiple pages in the application. For example, the state of a user card in an e-commerce app that can be shared across different pages. Page state is shared across widgets on the page. This can include things like which tabs are active, the contents of a form, or any user interactions. Component state is specific to a component, such as a product card component with a favorite button that shows whether the product is favored or not. But you may now ask, how about a text field that shows what we type? Doesn't it mean that the text field's state changes so that the text we are typing is shown? That's a great question, and you are right. This is widget state. Widget state is the state of widgets that FlutterFlow manages. Because you don't have access to inner pieces of the widget, you don't have access to its variables unless they are explicitly exposed. So in FlutterFlow, we provide variables representing useful states for some widgets like text fields, checkboxes, and radio buttons. Additionally, widget focus state indicates where a widget like a text field currently has focus, which means it's ready to receive user input. To indicate this, it often displays a visual clue, such as a blinking cursor in a text field. For example, for the search query text field, the widget state and widget focus state of a text field exposed by FlutterFlow on the created page or component, which they're gonna be available as an option in the variable menu. Note that when you add a component to a page, the widget state exposed in the component will also be available on its parent page. All right, let's review how these states are accessible. This diagram shows that the higher you get to the app state variables, the more accessible the state across multiple pages. The closer you get to the widget and component states, the more encapsulated it is within the widgets and components boundary. Beautiful. Let me give you a few important tips. First, when you create an app state, typically give a data type and leverage custom data type in this case. You can make your app state to persist. The persisted option means whether this app state is saved to the disk so that it can be loaded when the app is restarted. Otherwise, the field will be reset on restart. After adding your app state, for example, on the cart page, you can loop through the app state variables to display each item. You can update an app state from the action panel anywhere. For example, when it is on tab of a widget in a component or page. When you update the app state via the action flow editor, you will find multiple options in the action settings. Typically, you need to set your fields that needs to be updated and decide how these updates should have an impact on your page. Let's talk about it. First, set your fields. When you set an app state field, you also need to select your update type. Typically, you will have set, which is for setting a value, reset or clear, which is for clearing or resetting the value to the initial value or null, and you may have a specific update types depending on the type of the field. Like, for example, for integer, you may get increment or decrement. Then, how does this app state affect your app? That's the next question you need to ask yourself. And that's where you need to select proper update types for the action. There are three options: rebuild all pages, rebuild current page, no rebuild. But what do these options mean to us? Let's get into it. When you select rebuild current page while updating the app state, only the current page gets refreshed and rendered with the new value of the app state. This can be useful when changes only need to affect a single screen. Let's say you're working on a product details page for your e-commerce app and want user to add an item to their wish list. After the user taps the Add to Wishlist button, the item becomes highlighted on the current product page, indicating that this has been added. Since these changes only affect the current page, the specific product, we use rebuild current page. Now let's imagine that the dark mode setting needs to be applied across the entire app, from the product listing page to the checkout order, confirmation page, category page, and so on. To achieve this, you would select Rebuild All Pages. This ensures that every page in the app reflects the updated dark mode state. When we get to the generated code, I'm going to show you how this is generated in the code. We're going to talk about notify listener and other related code. Stay with me. Finally, there is the no rebuild option. This is useful when you want to update a variable in the app state, but don't need any visual feedback immediately. Imagine you are implementing a feature that tracks how many times a user has viewed a product, but you don't want to trigger any visual changes on the page. This view count is stored in app state for analytics purposes, but it doesn't need to cause the page to rebuild each time the user views a product. In this case, we need no rebuild option to silently update the view count without triggering a UI refresh. Beautiful. After going through all of these concepts, let's go to our demo app and see how we can work with app state. All right, it's time to put everything together and working with app state variables. Here is my app builder dashboard, and I'm going to show you two pages, order list page and product list. So each of these pages are using the cart counter component. And so what we're going to do right now, we're going to go to the product list and make sure that the top selling products, which at the moment are just a duplication of product item cart, are going to be generated dynamically from a product list that is coming from app state. And then once we click on this heart button, then we add this product to the cart. And even when you change the page, the number is going to remain the same. To do that, we need to go back to our product. Take a look at the product. We need an image, we need a product title, and a price item. And typically each product is going to have a unique identifier or ID. So we're going to go to our data type first. And for now, I'm going to go and create a data type called product. This product is going to have several fields, starting from ID, which is going to be an integer or a string. Let's give it a title and a description. And images, which is going to be image path. And it's going to be a list because a product can have several images. And then a product can also have sizes. So we're going to go and actually add sizes. But what are the sizes? Small, large, and etc. In fact, this is a perfect scenario for enums. I'm going to go to enums and create my sizes. I'm going to name it product sizes, not just to mix up with anything else. Let's add a value with large, small, and X large. Now let's go back to the data type and select the product. I'm going to add a new field here, sizes. And the type is going to be enum. And then product sizes. All right, that's going to be a list as well. That's great. So now what we're going to do, we're going to create a list of products. So I'm going to go back to our app values, and this time I go to app state. So we don't have any app state at the moment, but we need to add a variable. So let's go ahead and add an app state variable. Let's call it products. These products is going to be a type of data type that we just created, product. And it's going to be a list. I also want to make it persistent, so I'm going to go and enable persistent. I'm going to give you a tip before we move on, is that you can also select secure persisted field, which in case you're adding any sensitive data to the local storage of the device, saving on the device and reloading that later, it's better always to make it secure, which your data is going to be encrypted. You can also go ahead and add different items right now as the default value. I'm not going to do that right now. Let's go back to our page. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually generate a list of products here based on the value of the products from app state. Therefore, if I go to widget tree, you'll see that here, let me just open the widget tree. I have duplicated the product items. So I'm just going to delete the rest of that and keep only one. And we know that right now, if we have a list, we can dynamically generate children. So I'm going to go to the product setting and click on generate dynamic children. Let's give it a name, products list. And this time, when I click on setting from variables, I will have access to app state. All right, that's beautiful because I have a list of product as my state. So every time this is changing, so I'm going to have the result in my page. So I will not going to do anything else here, just confirm I want the list as is. All right, let's save and generate. Let's actually go ahead and repeat the same for new. First thing first, I'm going to delete all the product item cards component and keep only the first one. Go to the list, generate dynamic children. Let's call it products list 2 and app state. And I'm going to select the same products from app state. All right. Perfect. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to add another button, floating action button. Let's do a floating action button. And on clicking on this button, I will generate or create a new product and add it to the list. I'm going to go to action flow and on tab, we'll add an action. And what we're going to do, we're going to update our state. So I'm just going to search for update app state. And there you go. It's under state management. We're going to set the fields. I'm going to add a field and then it's asking me, okay, which app state you're going to update. I will select the product in this case. Beautiful. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to just select what I want to update. I want to add to list. I want to add, when I click on this, add to a list. All right, that's good. So let's do that. So now we need to set a value to add to a list. So I'm just going to click on set variable and I'm going to select a product data type. I'm going to create a data type object. And what object is that? Is the product object because I'm going to add it to the product list. So then I'm going to select the fields. So let's go for ID and let's continue on adding the rest of the fields and generate random sample data. So I'm going to do a sample data of first name for title. Just going to keep this description just as hard-coded and a list of images. So then I'm going to go and select the random sample data and a list of images. Perfect. And there's one more thing, and that's going to be sizes. And let's select the values of the sizes. Perfect. That's going to be all product sizes values. All right. Confirm. And lastly, we need to decide on what to update. whether it should be rebuilding all the pages or current page, and no rebuild. So because we are adding a product to the app state, and then it's going to reflect on the same page that the fab button is, then in fact, maybe rebuilding the current page is enough in this case. So we're just going to refresh and render only the current page. All right, that's good. Let's close. And that means now when I tap on the floating action button, we're going to add a product here. But this product item card is now just having hard-coded data. We need to read the data from the list. Let's quickly do that. I'm going to open the product item card. And to do that, we learned that we need to pass the parameters. So I need to define the component parameters. So let's define. What do we need? We need an ID just to define a unique identifier of this product. Then we need a title. And we also need a price, which is a double. And also we need one image at least. So I'm going to select the image path in this case. All right, let's confirm. There will be one change right now. So I need to select the image, and now I'll go to the properties panel, and all the way down to the image, I'll have access to my path. This is hard-coded right now. I'm just going to set from variable, and you'll see that I have access to component parameters, and I'm going to select the image. Beautiful. Then I will repeat the same for title. So I will go to the properties panel, set from variable and title. So this needs to also have a default variable because it's required. And then a price. So we're going to repeat that for price and maybe a 0 price default. All right, beautiful. So now we need to go back to our product list page. And you see right now the product item is now accepting parameters, but we have not yet passed any data. So we're going to go to the properties panel all the way down. And now we have ID, title, price, and image. Let's set them one by one. So the ID is going to be the products list that we just defined. And from the data structure field, and that automatically understand this is going to be a product. Beautiful. So I'm just going to select the ID in this case. I'm going to repeat the same for title, price. Oh, I just noticed that we have not defined price. All right, we need to fix this. Let's quickly do that after defining the image. Let's go back to the data type. And yes, I forgot the price. Let's do a price here. And the price is going to be a double. Perfect. Let me just reorder it. I want to have the price after title. Beautiful. Let's go back. Now go back to products on product list page, all the way down to the components property. Let's continue. Do I have the price right now? If I select the data structure field, there you go. I have the price. Fantastic. Let's confirm. And then images. I just need the first image from the list. So I'm going to select the data structure field for the product, go to the images. Then I will have some available options. Let's see. Because this is an array, I have different actions to do on this array. But what I really want is to just get the item at index. Like I need just to say first one, last one, or any other items in the list. So I'm just going to select on that and say, give me the first option. Maybe I can also pass a default variable value in case if it's not available. So then confirm. There you go. It's actually happening right now. Let me just repeat the same for the other one. So I just repeated the same thing for the other list as well. So it's just going to be identical, but that's fine. Let's do one more thing. As a best practice, we learned that if we have a list generated, so it's always good to set a unique key. So I'm just going to go back to component properties and click on unique key. And the best unique key is going to be the ID of the product because that's unique. Okay, let's confirm. There you go. Beautiful. So now whenever I click on this fab, so this list needs to get updated and we need to see one new product. One more thing. I want to click on this heart and change, or let's say I add this to the basket, where therefore the number in the basket, which is 1 right now, needs to change. So I'll go to the app value, to the app state, and then I'll define the cart item. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to have a list of ID of the product here. So I'm just going to keep string as a list, and then also it needs to be persisted because I want to keep data persisted on the reload or subsequent reload. Beautiful. So going back here, we need to go back to the product item card. And whenever we click on this item, which means I need to go to action, open the action flow editor, and on tab, I need to add an action to update my app state. But which field we're going to update? So it's going to be cart item this time. And what do we want to do for cart items? We're going to also add to the list because we have a list, right? So let's go ahead and do the ID in this get because we're passing the ID of the product to the component. So we're going to choose the ID here. So the update type for this action, though, it needs to be either rebuild all pages or rebuild containing page because the page that this component is there, it needs to get updated to render with a new data. Therefore, I'm going to select the rebuild containing page where this component is going to be there. So beautiful. So now what we're doing when we click on the icon, it's just going to add that to a list. So then we need to go back to our cart counter right now. And what we're going to do, we're going to change this container have to this text reading from the list of cards. How can we do that? We can select the text, set it from variable, and then you'll see I have an app state access. I'm going to select my cart items. I want to say this time, what do I want from cart items? This is a list. I just need the total number of the items. So the number of items is enough for me. So we can do one more fun thing here is that, so this container, let me just open my widget tree. Actually, we can make this now a conditional visibility. So what it means that I can go to properties panel, enable the conditional and set a variable. And I'm going to say from my app state, the cart items, whenever the number of items is set or not empty, then show this container. But if it's 0, do not show anything. All right, that's nice. So we also added a condition based on the state. That's fantastic. All right, before we do a demo, let's do one more thing. Now we're adding a product to the list as well as adding a product to the cart. So let's reset all of this. Then how? I'm going to go to the product setting. Then let's just rename invoice and instead pass reset app state. And for the action, I'm just going to open the action. I'm going to remove this action, add a new action, app state, and then I will go ahead and select product, and then say clear value. And I will repeat the same for cards, and I also remove the values. And then I say rebuild all pages. Fantastic. Now we also have a reset button. Now let's go ahead and test it out. There you go. It's loading right now. And I'm going to go to the profile setting. Here's my button right now for resetting the app state. Let's do that. Well, if I now go to the page, you'll see everything is empty. No product, no card, nothing. So I'm just going to click on Fab. There you go. The first product is appearing. Another one, another one, another one. Fantastic. So now we have products. What if I click right now on the heart? There you go. It's appearing right on the top. So another one, another one. Lovely. So if I now go to my order list, as you can see, this counter card number is still the same because it's reading from app state. And if I do this, make it as 5, go to order list, the order is going to be changed. Now, if I go back to my profile setting, click on reset, we already cleared the value. If I go back to order list, there's no number. Fantastic. And nothing here. Beautiful. So everything is working as expected. So now let's move on to the next video and see how we can work with page state. So far, we managed to work with app states variables, and let's now working with page state variables. Here is my e-commerce app, and I have the product list page open. And in this product page, we have a drop-down that is showing the categories. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to say by selecting any category, we can change the value of this category. In fact, right now, since we don't have real data, I'm just going to change the category name here. Okay, what I want to do here is changing this drop-down state only is going to affect this page because this drop-down only exists on this page. There's no other pages that has this drop-down. That's a perfect scenario for page state. Now, if I select my page list, I can have access to the state management for this page on the properties panel. And as you can see, I can define a local page state variables here. I'm going to go and add a field here in this case. Your field can have different types, including the custom types that you are creating. Let's say if you are creating a type of product for this page, you can even do that. But what we're going to do right now, we're going to actually keep the state of this drop-down widget into a page state so we can use that anywhere else on this page. All right. So let's go back to the state management, add a field, let's name it category. And I'm going to select a string here. And as you can see, after selecting a string, it says whether this can be a nullable or is list or not. Nullability in this case means if I select it, then the default value could be empty. And that's actually the case because the dropdown does not have a default value. And it's not obviously a list, so I'm just going to leave on is list unchecked. And I'm not going to pass any initial value at this point. Let's just keep it empty. Let's confirm. There you go. Now I have my category page state variable and it requires a value. Let's see how we can do that. I'm going to select my dropdown and then I'm going to add an action for this dropdown. When I open my action, I have unselected action trigger, where in this case, I can add an action to update my page state. So let me just show you one more thing. If I go now back to my state management, I have access to my app state to update or to update page state. Let's select update page state. And this time, when I set a field, it just shows me the local page state variables, and that's only the category. And we need to define what type of action we want to do. In fact, in this case, we're going to set a value. And what is this value? That's an interesting part. So I'm going to click on set from variable. And in my set variable options, we will see that we have now page state. And obviously we don't want page state here. What we want though instead is widget state. Exactly. We have two widgets. Now they have widget states in this page. The text field for search and the dropdown for category. I'm going to go back now without adding any action. I'm going to go back to my dropdown and I will rename this to category dropdown. All right. Then I will open the action flow again. And this time, if I set the value, you will see that I'm going to have the category dropdown. I just wanted to say that this dropdown is the one that you have on the page. All right. Let me just select this. And so whenever there is some item is selected from dropdown, it will be set into my local category variable. All right, how do we want to update the page then? There's only two options right now because we are on this page, then we just want to rebuild this page, which means we need to refresh or re-render the page with the new value. Or if you don't want to rebuild. So in this case, I want to rebuild current page. All right, beautiful. Now let's go back to our category. So I'm going to go and select the text for category, click on setting the variable for this category, and I will search for combined text. So the text first is going to be category. I'm going to add a new one. And then for the new one, I'm going to select from variable again, but this time from page state. Beautiful. So which means whenever you select something from dropdown, it will actually set it for the category and it will appear after that. Let's confirm. Beautiful. Let's test it out right now. All right, here is my test mode. I'm gonna go to the page. And as you can see right now, it says category null because there is no value for this. But if I open the dropdown and select kids, that's gonna change to kids. Let's change it to women and women. All right, let's go back again to our page. And so if I now go to order list page, and if I open the page state for this one, you'll see that there is no variable available here. And even if I now click on any item to just add an action, you will see that under the state management, there is no page state because the page state variables that we define is for another page, but we do have access to app state. All right, that was it for the page state. Let's move on to the next video to see now how we can play around or working with the component state. So far, we worked with app state variables and page state variables. Now it's time to work with component state variables. So in our demo, we have this icon, the heart icon. So for now, it's actually adding the product ID to the card. So I'm going to go to my product item card and add another button to just add it to the cart instead. So I'm going to use a button, change it to add to bag, for example, make the font size a bit smaller, and let me also change the height and potentially a little bit less padding. Beautiful. What we're going to do right now, I'm going to go to this icon, go to Action Flow Editor. I will cut the action that we've done in the previous demo. We want to remove the on tab. And then I'll come back to another button that we just added. Go to the Action Flow Editor. Click on Tab. And this time, I'm just going to click on Paste Action. There you go. Very easy, isn't it? What we're going to do right now, we're going to add an action on this button. When you click on that, it just makes it as this heart, like field color. And when it's not selected, with just border. All right. So for doing that, we're going to just update the state of this component. And that's where the component state variable come in place. So I'm going to go to my widget tree and select my component card here. And this time, if I go to the property panel, you'll see that you're going to have state management access. And there you go. You can create a local component state variable right now. Let's do that. I'm going to set my state variable as is selected. And obviously, you can have different types, including the custom type that you can create. But for now, I'm going to go and select a Boolean. Is this going to be a nullable state field or not? So I would say I want this always to be present, so I don't want a nullable. Therefore, I want to set the initial value. So either going to be selected or not selected. So I'm going to keep it as not selected. Let's confirm. Now I'm going to have my local component state variable. So now what we should do is when you click on, based on the state that we just defined, we need to load different icon buttons. All right, beautiful. So we need a conditional builder. So now I'm going to go to my widget tree right now. And for if, which is going to be true, I'll just go and add an icon button. Or I'm just going to actually add an icon button. And for else, which is going to be the false, I will repeat the same. And now I have two icons. Let me just remove the other one that we have right now. And let's go ahead and make the cosmetic. So I'm going to select the first icon. Let's rename it to selected button. Let's remove the field color, change the icon to hard, and move the alignment to top right. And the hard color should be our color from the design system. So beautiful. And when it's not selected, the other one, let's do that. We're going to repeat the same for this one too. I'm going to go to the properties panel, move it to the top right, remove the field color, and this time I will select a heart with border and change the color to the same color for the field color. All right, nice. Now we're going to add an action. So when the button is selected, that means we're going to change the state to the opposite state. So I'm going to go to the actions and open the action flow, and on tab, add a new action. And here I will say under the state management, you'll see that now we have update component state. Beautiful. So I'm going to go and add the field here is selected, which is from the component state variable. What we're going to do here, we're going to toggle the value, set the value, or reset. I know I can do the toggle value, but for now, I actually want to go and do the set value in this case. And I explicitly want to set the value to false. Let's also select how we want to update after this set is already done. And we have now three options. So either we can rebuild the containing page, which means that the component is if it's in any page, so that page can be refreshed and re-rendered. Or only the component can be refreshed. For now, actually, I just want the component to be refreshed. So I'm just going to keep rebuild current component. And I need to repeat the same for else. And when it comes to else, that means it's not selected. So that means I want to click and make this selected. So let's actually go ahead and select the icon, add an action, and technically want to select the update component is selected field, set the value to true. All right, that's good. So now we have two buttons. And let's go to the condition builder. So here is our condition. So what should be the condition? So the condition should be now based on the component state variable. So I'm just going to click on the if, and I'm going to go to the component state, and I will select the is selected. Beautiful. So whenever it's selected is true, then it goes showing what is now as a field. And if I click on that, that's going to make the opposite of is selected, and then the other one will appear. So that should be nice. It should work right now. Let's go ahead and test it in our test mode. All right, it's loading right now. Let's go to the product list page. There you go. Now I have my products. I'm going to click on the heart, and lovely. I do have now only the updating state of the component for this product. Beautiful. Everything is working as expected. So in the upcoming modules, we're going to work more on the state and state management. And also we're going to persist this data not only on the app state and the disk, or maybe on the user's mobile phone, but also in the database. Stay tuned for module 15 and module 14. All right, so let's go to the next video and wrap it up with generated code. All right, let's now talk about generated code. As always, you can download the source code from developer mode or using the CLI, or as well as you can go to the FlutterFlow desktop app. All right, here is my generated code. I'm going to open the lib folder, and the first thing I want to start with is the constants. The constants are going to be defined in the app constant file. And as you can see, it will go under the FF app constants abstract class. So you can use that now globally everywhere in your code. In fact, now I'm going to get a reference of that, and you will see that it's already in use in the product list page as well as profile setting page. And that's exactly what we've done in our demos. Next, I want to talk about the custom data types that we defined. And those gonna go under the backend folder and under the schema. So you're gonna have the enums. So if I open the enums, you'll see all the enums that I just defined they are appearing here with some extensions that have some helper methods. And you can see, for example, serialize and deserialize here on an extension for all of the enums. It's just because FlutterFlow will handle this process for us. And you can also see the structs. These are the custom types. So if I now go to my product struct, you will see that the product struct, the product custom type that you define with ID, title, price, description, images, and sizes, they are all are appearing here. The product struct always gonna extend a base struct. A base struct is gonna handle the serialize and deserializing all of the other custom types. And as I said, FlutterFlow is handling this process for us. I want to show you the size here. So this size is going to be a list of product sizes, and the product size, in fact, was our enum. So every custom type that you create is going to have the name of the custom type under struct as a file, and also the class name as the custom type that you define plus the struct. So I'm going to show you like where we're using that right now. If I just now look for the references, you will see that we're using this product in app state and also in product list page. That was exactly where we were using adding a product because we had the FAB or floating action button, add to products. Beautiful. There's another thing I want to show you, and that's a schema utility. All the base functions or class are actually residing here in this case. Every helper method that you want and every other method related to a struct. Let me just show you another thing right now, and that's where we're defining our app state. The app state is coming to the app underline state file, and the class that is defined, in fact, is going to be FF app state. So FF app state is a class. If I look for the references, you will see that we're using that almost everywhere. And that's because the app state are going to be available throughout your app. And the interesting part is that the FF app state class is in fact extending change notifier, which means that it is able to notify when there is an update. And here's the things: notifier listener. And that's where it goes to selecting the update type when you are setting your app state. You remember we had, like, for example, rebuild all pages? That's exactly these notify listeners. All the listeners to the app state, by selecting that option, gonna get called the notify listener, and they're gonna listen to the update, or they receive the update. There's also a lot of helper functions here, like for deleting a product or add to products or remove from products, because we defined a list in this case. So we get all of these helper methods. These are all internals, but this is interesting to read. And if you define another one, you also get all of this for the other ones as well. And I want to also point out the Flutter Secure Storage in this case. And as you can see, because we selected securing our persisted data, all of the data that we are adding to storage is going to be using the Flutter Secure Storage package, which means it's going to be encrypted and secured. So now let's talk about page state variables. So we define that in product list page. Let me just go to the product list page model. And here is the file that we define. And as you can see, the comment even here is coming local state fields for this page. And this is the local state that we defined. Category, which was actually getting updated by selecting the dropdown. Okay, so let's see how it's used in fact. So if I now go to my product list page, so I'm going to have my model here. So let me just go ahead and search for model.category. And there you go. Here is where we are actually updating or set the value for the category local state. We're actually, whenever this is our FlutterFlow dropdown, and whenever it's changing on change, it's going to set the value of the dropdown to the category. And it's interesting because it's then calling the set state. Let me just quickly show you what this means. Let's go back to our builder for a second. So this was our category on product list page. And on dropdown, on an action, we had the rebuild current page. And that's the difference. When we say the rebuild current page on this local state, that's going to call the set state on the page. And that's going to render again the page with new values. But let's take a look at also component state. So now I'm going to go to product item cart component. And you will see that when I open the model, now I'm going to have is selected, which was our local component state variable. And the default is also false in this case. And let's see where we are using this right now. We're using that in product item cart widgets. And let's take a look at that where. And that's exactly the builder we have. We're saying if this is true, then do this. And if you go to the onPress event right now, you'll see that on press, the model is set to false, and then we're calling set state. So set state is rebuilding this component, which is the product item component. And then on the else, where we had the other button, so we are selecting true, and then we do the same. So I'm going to show you one more thing. If you remember, we had a reset button to reset the app state. And by doing that, we were actually refreshing all the pages or re-rendering all the pages. Let's take a look at that quickly. I'm going to open my profile setting pages, and that's the item reset app state. And on tab, we had an action that were resetting or deleting the products. And as you can see, this is a helper on the FF app state class. Lovely. And it was actually setting the products to an empty array again because we chose the reset. Let's actually take a look at that quickly. So this was my reset app state. So I'm going to go and open the action flow for this, the callback. And you see now we're doing this by clearing the value of the product as well as the item cart. And then we were rebuilding all the pages. Now let's take a look at the code. And we're doing that right now. We were deleting all the products. We're setting in a new value because it was an array, and the same for card. And then at the end, we were calling update on FF app state, where update was just calling, well, the callback wasn't doing anything, but calling the notify listener, which means everywhere that this app state variable was used has received a notify that needs to be updated. Fantastic. Let me do one more thing, and that's very important. Let me go back to FlutterFlow folder and then open the FlutterFlow model. So I'm going to actually point out about wrap with model. This helper method in FlutterFlow model file wrapping the child in a provider model to make it accessible to the child and sets a callback function, which is generally used to call setState in the parent page and update any changed values. So this is a very important actually helper function. So as I said, then FlutterFlow is using provider, and then provider is helping for different things, including injecting the model, making that accessible, and handling the states management. So if I look at the references, the usage references of this function, you will see that you will find them in all the widgets and pages. For example, in the profile setting page, so my components right now are wrapped with model. Beautiful.